How to set the exposure correctly on a Nikon D7200 or on any other Nikon camera, or actually any other camera if you want to get the right exposure. Let's talk a little bit about this. Hello everybody, my name is Attila Mate from Blue Sky Photography, and today I'd like to talk to you about the correct exposure setting. I've got a comment from one of my viewers, and he actually bought the Nikon D7200, and I have another few followers who has this camera, and they requested if I can make a short video about the settings of the camera. Now I think that it has to be like a series of short videos, and I was thinking a lot how to do it, you know, that as many people as possible can benefit from these videos. So I would not like to speak just about the Nikon D7200. I would like to speak about situations where anybody, even if you use a Canon camera or Sony camera, you can understand what I'm talking about and you can apply it on your camera. Now, obviously, I will speak in these videos, you know, from the Nikon D7200, and I will explain also in the menu, you know, how you can do this and that. But that you can find in your camera, that's no problem, you know. So it might be some different location, but you can find the same menu item in your camera as well. So let's start this series with the first and the most important thing in photography, and that would be the right exposure. Now, to find the right exposure, it is critical because your picture can be overexposed or underexposed. Now, a lot of photographers, new photographers, they will think that to overexpose a little bit an image or underexpose is the same situation, but unfortunately it's not. So there is a kind of unwritten rule, you know, that it's much better to underexpose an image than to overexpose it. So if you underexpose an image, in post-processing you will be able to bring it back much more than if you overexpose the image. So the blown highlights, it's much more difficult to bring it down than if it's underexposed a little bit and then just raise it up to the normal level. So please don't forget this whenever you're shooting in whichever situation. Usually what you do is you when you do the metering, you will check in the picture the most bright part of the picture, and then you will expose for that. And that is critical. That is very important. Now, if you have the example, if you photograph your subject with a bright sky and sunshine behind, that means if you meter on the sky will be well exposed, but your subject will be underexposed. Now here, this will be another video, and this will be about lighting. So how you can use flash or LED light or to fill up this gap, you know, because if you meter on the sky or something very bright, you know, then your subject obviously will be underexposed. But if you meter on your subject and then leave the sky how it is, then the sky will be blown out. And this is something, if you check in many photographers' pictures and many photographers' work, this is a problem because they have blown out skies, and that, I think, it's not looking professional at all. I mean, if you want to be a professional photographer, the first and the most important thing should be that you learn how to expose to get the right sky, and then you get your subject as well in the picture rightly exposed. So this exposure series, it will contain 3 different short videos. Now, one of the first is the shutter speed, the second is the aperture, and the third is the ISO. Now let's start today with the shutter speed, because obviously from these 3 elements you compose your exposure. So if we start about shutter speed, in which situation, how you can use your shutter speed. if you are a photographer who think that you knows everything about shutter speed, then I think this video will be a little bit boring to you, but I try my best not to. So, shutter speed. There is a golden rule about the shutter speed in photography, that the lens, the millimeter of the lens, the focal length of the lens, the shutter speed you use with the respective lens cannot be less than the focal length. So it means if I use a 50mm lens, the minimum shutter speed I can use, it is 1/50th of a second. If you use a 200mm lens, the minimum shutter speed you can use is 1/200th of a second. If you go lower than that, you have the tendency that your pictures will have blur, motion blur or shake blur or something. So that's the golden rule, let's say. But I usually, what I do, I don't like to push the limits, so I will use like a 200mm lens, I will use a 1/250th of a second. I won't use 1/200th of a second. And again, if you go with wider lenses, the lens is wider, you know, the risk is smaller that your picture will be shaky or something. But in the same time, if I use an 18mm lens, I never shoot on 1/18th of a second, no, or 1/20th of a second, no. I will use usually 1/100th of a second or something like that. So I will raise a little bit up my shutter speed. I try my best. That's why I try to use faster glass to be able to control my shutter speed, you know, better. But this is in the photography side. Now, a lot of photographers, and I speak with a few of my friends, you know, and who is not in videography, more in photography, you know, they don't really know about the shutter speed, how you use shutter speed in videography. Now, in videography, I would say just 1 minute I will spend with this topic, you know, I don't want to skip this. So in videography, you have a different rule. You don't use like that. If you shoot videos, even if it's not professional, just for yourself, it's handy that you know this, because you can save a lot of hassle after that. So in videography, how you use your shutter speed is another golden rule. There is another golden rule for this, and that is how much is your frame rate? Double that. So it means if you are shooting with 30 frames a second, then your shutter speed will be 60 frames a second, or the closest. So if you cannot set, let's say if you shoot 24 frames a second, then you cannot shoot 48, then you will shoot at 1/50th of a second. So double your frame rate or the closest to it. So if you shoot slow-mo, like let's say 120 frames a second, let's say, then double your frame rate again. But don't push very much over your frame rate. So, over double your frame rate. If you shoot 25 frames a second, and you should be shooting at 1/50th of a second, you know, with your shutter speed, don't try to push it at 100th of a second, or because it's not good. And sometimes photographers, they are tempted to do that because they are outside. And let's say you shoot 25 frames a second, and then you see that, oops, there's a problem, because I would not like my aperture to close down. I would like to have that cinematic look, you know, with the blurred background and the bokeh and all that. But if you don't close down your aperture, that means that your video will be overexposed, because the 1/50th of a second is, let's say, in a lot of light. And the ISO, obviously, you cannot pull down lower than 100. So what you do then? Here comes that you must use a neutral density filter, but don't push up your shutter speed. Don't do that. That has a horrible effect on your video. It would be too long to talk about this, what's the effect, and you can search about this, and if you are interested, I can make a video. Just leave a comment down below, and if some people are interested, then I will make a video about this, but it won't be good. So let's not spend a lot of time with video, go back to photography. So that was video photography. The golden rule is that what's the millimeter of your lens, what's the focal length of your lens, That should be your minimum shutter speed. Now, this is a golden rule for a normal situation where there is no fast movement. So don't get me wrong, this golden rule does not apply in any situation, in every situation. This applies only in the situations when there is no fast movement in the frame. If you have the fast moving subject, you want to track somebody, then you must use higher shutter speeds. So what I like to do then, I like to go up to 1/500th of a second, even if I use a 50mm lens. But if I use, let's say, a 200mm lens, then I'd like to go up at least to 1/750th of a second. Because the faster is the shutter speed, the bigger is the possibility that you avoid all the motion blur. So let's make this clear from the beginning, that rule, that golden rule, does not apply in any situation. Now, if you are in normal situation, just no fast moving subject, that's okay, that's fine. And as you know, I don't really use vibration controlled lens, and I have a separate video about this, why I don't use vibration controlled lens. There are several reasons for that, and I don't want to get into this because it will be too long. But vibration control, in some situations, it will help you to avoid the motion blur, and then your shutter speed, you can go a bit lower than how I do. But in most of the situations, like I shoot, you know, that's nonsense, so I don't really use it. But anyway, back to the shutter speed. So what we agreed, in normal situation, you can use the same shutter speed as your focal length. That means 50mm lens, 1/50th of a second. 100mm lens, 100th of a second. 150mm lens, 150th of a second. And so on and so on. If you are tracking subjects, fast moving subjects, then you can raise up, you actually have to raise up your shutter speed just to make sure that your motion blur will be avoided. Now, the second important thing is the aperture to control your exposure. But that will be another short video. If you have any question regarding the shutter speed, please leave a comment down below, and I will do my best to answer your questions. If you have something to add to this video, something constructive, please feel free to leave a comment down below. I'm not a perfect person, I'm just a human being like every other man, so I can make mistakes. I would like to help others, you know, who doesn't really understand what's the reason of shutter speed and aperture and ISO, and slowly we will move up, you know, in different categories of the Nikon D7200 and any other camera, so you can learn more and more about photography, because that's the most important thing, to learn, practice and learn. And you must learn your camera, you must know your camera from inside out. Even if somebody will wake you up in the night, you must know every button where it is, you must know how to set this, how to set that. If you start searching around, you know, that's not good. You will lose some important moments. So this is it for this video. This was only a short video, and you will get the next one with the aperture and the next one with the ISO in a few days time. And I hope it will be helpful to somebody, and I hope you liked it. If you liked it, please like and subscribe to see more videos like this coming. And I wish you a nice day, and see you in the next one. Take care, guys. Bye.
I'm gonna throw my memories away. Now I feel I'm done, and I am cursed by every day till my time is gone. I've never felt this way before, and now I know this all for sure.